Tough group. So, everybody, welcome to my Group C analysis, preview, and predictions for the CONCACAF Gold Cup 2017. And here today, this is our third and final group, and in my opinion, the most balanced group of the three this year at the Gold Cup in this edition. So we have Mexico, El Salvador, Curacao, and Jamaica. First, I want to start with Mexico. Mexico enters this tournament with a lot of pressure on manager Juan Carlos Osorio. Many consider the Confederations Cup performance to have been a failure, despite the fact that Mexico got into the semifinals and ultimately finished fourth. But if you put the whole run in that tournament into context, a lot of Mexican fans and the Mexican Federation is dissatisfied with the way Mexico played, having to come from behind in all of their games. And there is a question of whether or not Juan Carlos Osorio is taking this side to the next level, as was one of his intended goals. That's going to be a topic itself for another video, but heading into this Gold Cup as the defending champions, in combination with the fact of what I just said, and the fact that Pulido has to be replaced due to injury, there's not a very high morale. There's not a lot of confidence from Mexico heading into this tournament. Osorio is using this the same way that Bruce Arena for the United States is using it, the same way that Germany did for the Confederations Cup, testing out mainly a young squad for World Cup qualifiers and possibly for the tournament next year in Russia itself. I looked at the roster Mexico's sending. This is more or less a C team. And I wrote down here a list of players that are very young, have had very little international experience, only been called up for the national team a few times, making me feel old because some of these players I'm about to mention are younger than I am. So there's Jesus Gallardo, Cesar Montes, Orbelín Pineda, Alejandro Mayorga, Eric Gutierrez, Jesus Duenas, and then there are a couple of seasoned veterans sprinkled in there like Moses Munoz, who is 37 years old, and Hugo Ayala. So it's basically the same approach that the United States is taking for this Gold Cup. Mexico, the goal for this tournament, let's face it, it's Mexico. High expectations aplenty in the CONCACAF region. The expectation is to successfully defend the Gold Cup trophy, C team or not. Get out of this group, win the group, go on to retain the title. Mexico has won back-to-back Gold Cups before. They've done it 3 times in a row in the 1990s. They did it in 2009 and 2011. And now they did it in 2015 through highly controversial fashion, but a victory nonetheless. For Mexico, there's not really much to talk about with this side because I already mentioned the main highlights here, that there's an enormous amount of pressure on Osorio's head for this tournament. And anything less than winning this Gold Cup is a failure. And for them, at least. And honestly, this is a tournament that's dominated by by Mexico and the United States. You kind of have to expect that if they don't win, they will consider it to be a disappointment. And nothing less than that will satisfy media critics and fans alike. Nonetheless, this seems to be a pretty talented Mexican side. I've seen a few of these guys, highlights here and there in the Liga Mex. I have to be honest, I'm not entirely familiar with them. So I had to do a little bit brushing up on my research. Wikipedia helps a lot. But Mexico should still be expected to come out of this group. I think this is the toughest group of the tournament, like I said earlier in this video. But you have to expect Mexico to come through, especially considering that the 2 best third-place teams go to the quarterfinals. El Salvador. El Salvador is one of the weakest teams in Central America. They're better than Belize and Nicaragua. Although I would put Honduras, Costa Rica, Panama, and even Guatemala ahead of them. Guatemala not making this tournament solely due to suspension purposes. Unfortunate for them. El Salvador is hard to describe. They're a side that doesn't score very many goals. They don't tend to advance far into the latter stages of World Cup qualification. You really expect them to be eliminated in the third or fourth round, a couple of rounds before the Hex begin. This time around, they made it to the penultimate round right before the Hex, where there were 12 teams remaining. They made it to the Hex a couple of times. I believe the last time was in 2010, but they have not been back since. I do not believe El Salvador have qualified for the World Cup since 1982. So this is a country that, although they are crazy about football, look up the Football Wars of 1969 on Wikipedia if you know what I mean. But they're very much still a developing nation in that regard. It's a very popular sport. It's been that way for decades in El Salvador. I have a couple of El Salvadoran friends that are absolutely nuts about this sport. But the national team itself really isn't that good. So looking at some players here, I wrote down Henry Romero, Richard Menjivar, Darwin Seren, Gerson Mayen, Nelson Bonilla, Rodolfo Zelaya, Andres Flores, Brian Tamacas, and Benji Villalobos. Two names here really strike out to me, and those are Nelson Bonilla and Rodolfo Zelaya. I'm very familiar with these guys because I remember seeing them in previous Gold Cups. Zelaya scored a goal on the United States back at the 2013 edition. Both him and Nelson Bonilla are two of El Salvador's highest scoring players heading into this tournament. That gives the team some veteran experience. I remember watching these guys through CONCACAF World Cup qualifying a couple of cycles ago. They're pretty decent players. They almost helped El Salvador get to the semifinals of the 2011 edition when they barely lost out to Panama on penalties. So these two guys, expect them to be the main playmakers for El Salvador going forward if they're going to create very many chances to score. Remember the names, guys. Nelson Bonilla and Rodolfo Zelaya. Two pretty okay guys. But for El Salvador as a whole, I think this group might just be too tough for them. They could sneak through as one of the third-placed teams. But I don't know. We'll see. So then next we have Curaçao. Curaçao, fun fact, used to be part of the Netherlands Antilles until the name was changed. I believe it was a few years ago. Curaçao is actually a Dutch colony in the Caribbean, one of the very few. And this is a relatively new team in FIFA. They are a member of FIFA. They have not been for a long time. They have competed in World Cup qualifying for this cycle for 2018. A lot of these guys play in Europe. I looked at the roster. You have some of Curaçao's starters playing in the Netherlands, in France. I believe Leandro Bacuna plays for Aston Villa, which is a major club in the English Premier League. So they have European exposure. And Curaçao further benefits from the fact that Dutch internationals are allowed to play for the team if they have some kind of lineage to the island itself. And this national team was formerly coached by Patrick Kluivert, who is a former Dutch international that played for the Netherlands into the 1998 World Cup. He was the manager of this team before his predecessor took over. So I look at this Curaçao side. I think they're dark horses. I really do. Read through the names: Leandro Bacuna, Gino Van Kessel, Javaro Nepomuceno, Feliciano Zuchin. A lot of these guys have Dutch names, Portuguese names. I watched some of the highlights of the matches they played in the Caribbean Cup this year. Curaçao are the current 2017 Caribbean champions. For the first time ever, they won that title. They beat Jamaica in the final, who happens to be in their group. I'll get to them in a second. So this is a pretty decent squad. This is a new, up-and-coming side in CONCACAF that I think, as the sport continues to grow in their small country. Uh, we could be seeing Curacao advance to the latter stages of World Cup qualification, reaching a fourth round, reaching a hex, potentially maybe several years from now, being a CONCACAF representative at the Gold Cup. I do believe that we are potentially witnessing another Trinidad and Tobago in the making in Curacao. So a rising force in Caribbean football, a rising force in CONCACAF. Looking at the highlights, a lot of these guys are pretty talented. And if they can get more of that international experience, more European Dutch nationals coming over and playing for their island, this team could grow. So, and also, guys, keep in mind, this is a small, tiny island in the Caribbean with only a population of 159,000 people. Sounds like a lot, but it's not. 159,000 people in their country, with only a couple of major cities. So, I think Curacao is a potential here to pull off a surprise, and maybe advance in second or third. Maybe take advantage if Mexico slips up and even tops this group. It wouldn't be totally crazy because Mexico did not top their group in the 2015 Gold Cup. They finished right behind Trinidad and Tobago. So, and then we go on to the final team in this group and the final team in this tournament, Jamaica. Jamaica became the first ever Caribbean island country to reach the Gold Cup final. That was back in 2015, if you guys remember, and it was against Mexico. They lost 3-1. That was an excellent tournament from them. They eliminated the United States in the semifinals. Also played the Copa America Centenario last year in 2016 in the United States in a group with, again, Mexico, and they lost that match 2-0, I believe. So now Jamaica has been grouped with Mexico twice in two major tournaments. This is sort of an opportunity here for revenge. And maybe they could exploit the fact that Mexico is sending mostly a reserve team with very little experience. Maybe they can get a result on them here. Maybe a draw or maybe even a win. It wouldn't be too surprising because I look at the roster. A lot of these guys are the same core of that 2015 Gold Cup side that reached the final. Going through the names here, Alvis Powell, Damian Lowe, Darren Mattox, I remember him. I believe he scored one of the goals against the United States in that semifinal. Javon Watson, yep, familiar. And Jermaine Johnson, not really familiar at all with Jermaine Johnson, but he is one of their leading goal scorers that they're sending into this tournament. I think he has scored 9 times for his national team. Could be wrong, I'm not sure. But some of these names I recognize, and you look at Jamaica, they're always a very fast, physical team. I remember we struggled against them greatly at the Gold Cup in 2015, where we were eliminated by them. And every encounter they've had with Mexico, they've been pretty entertaining games. Every time Jamaica has played Mexico in the last couple of years, they've taken the fight to Mexico. And I think here they could potentially cause a surprise and get out of this group, because the goal for Jamaica is to prove that their run to the 2015 final was not a fluke. So I think for Jamaica, the aim here is at least to get back to the semifinals again. So, oh, and a little bit trivia for you. They are coached by Theodore Whitmore, who I believe was their goalkeeper and captain at Jamaica's first and only appearance in the World Cup, which was back in 1998 in France. So, who's going to come out of this group? Guys, this is pretty tough. You expect Mexico to come through. I'm confident Mexico will advance, but I'm not confident they're going to win this group. And then you look at the other 3 teams, there's not much separating them. Curacao, El Salvador, and Jamaica. One thing I forgot to add about Jamaica is they're sort of been in decline. Ever since the 2016 Copa America, they really have not been the same team that they were at the Gold Cup in 2015. They've been struggling a little bit, and much to their disappointment, they did not qualify for the CONCACAF final round hex, which is really it's a regression of Jamaican football, because they had reached the hex in the 2014 cycle, followed by a run to the Gold Cup finals, and they did not even reach the final 6 teams. So now they have to wait to 2022. And Jamaican football, for the most part, is mostly in shambles at the moment. So anyway, had to add that because I forgot to mention. Who is coming out of this group? All I know is Mexico is not getting 9 points. Mexico's not getting 9 points. I can see Mexico getting 5 to 7 points here. Would not be surprised they get a single win and 2 draws. Would not be surprised. But Mexico is probably going to win this group. I'm going to pick Mexico to top it in first. And to play it safe, I'm going to give them 7 points. Who are they going to drop points to? They're going to drop points to Jamaica because I do think the revenge factor here is going to come into play. Here's a little specific, bold prediction. I think Mexico is going to have a little bit of a scare with Jamaica. I think in that match with them and the Jamaicans, Jamaica will score first, Mexico will equalize, and Jamaica will just barely miss out on getting that revenge. So I think Mexico will beat Curacao, they'll beat El Salvador, but I think they're going to tie with Jamaica. So does that mean Jamaica goes through in second? No. Last Gold Cup, El Salvador and Jamaica were in the same groups, right? El Salvador, everyone in that group tied each other with the exception of Jamaica winning their 2 games against Canada and El Salvador. Costa Rica, 3 points, 3 draws, right? El Salvador, 2 points, Canada, 2 points. I think that's going to happen here again, but the roles are going to be reversed. I see Jamaica getting 3 draws. I think they're going to draw with the Caribbean champions Curacao, who beat them in the Caribbean Cup final. I don't think they're going to beat El Salvador. I think that's got maybe a 0-0 written all over it. I'm going to be a little bit bold. I think I see 3 draws here for Jamaica. And that's not enough to come in second in this group. So who's going to come in second? Guys, for most of this week, I was thinking of El Salvador. I was thinking El Salvador will finish in second in this group. But I'm gonna go with the small Dutch island Caribbean nation of Curacao. I said these guys were dark horses. I said look out for them. Young, upcoming talent. European experience, club experience across the board. The Caribbean champions, Curacao, are going to come in second in this group. Jamaica will come in third, and I think El Salvador will come in fourth because I just don't see El Salvador having enough goal-scoring power up front to make up the goal difference in this group if it does come down to that, if the 3 bottom teams are level on points. So that's my prediction, guys. Mexico to win the group, Curacao to come in second, Jamaica to come in third, El Salvador in fourth, and you know what? Jamaica will advance as one of the best third-placed sides since the two out of 3 third-place teams go. So thank you for watching my video. I'll see you tomorrow with my knockout stage predictions. And then that's it, guys. The tournament starts on Friday. So until then, love you all. Peace out. Have a good night.